Hello everyone and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review the stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's dive in. We begin our review of global economy with key releases in the US, Europe, China, India, and Japan. Stock market trading in the US and Europe was dominated by expectations of a rate cut amid a flood of economic data. This week, Sweden held its interest rate unchanged and held out for a possible rate cut in May or June. Investors have been bidding up stocks in the hopes that central banks around the world are laying the groundwork for possible rate cuts in the second half as inflation continues to soften. A week ago, the US, the UK, and Norway held their policy rates, but Switzerland bucked the trend and led other central banks by lowering rates by 25 basis points. Let's review global economic news, and we start with the US. The US economic growth was revised slightly higher to 3.4% on upward revisions in consumer spending and non-residential fixed investment. But economic growth in 2023 was left revised at 2.5%. Housing market data showed an uneven recovery, but the underlying demand remained solid for new homes amid the low availability of existing homes. New home prices continue to rise amid a lack of supply and stable construction costs. The housing market seems to be frozen as home buyers are struggling with elevated prices and home sellers are facing sharply higher mortgage rates on newly purchased properties. In addition, the personal consumption expenditures index rose at a faster annual pace of 2.5%, and the core index slowed to 2.8%. Investors will have a first opportunity to react to this alternative measure of inflation data on Monday. Across the Atlantic, the UK confirmed that the economy contracted in the December quarter by 0.3% and barely expanded by 0.1% in 2023. Annual inflation in France eased to 2.3% in March and dropped to the lowest level since September 2021 amid a widespread slowdown in prices. However, Italian inflation accelerated in March to 1.3% after energy price inflation rebounded from a low base. German retail sales unexpectedly fell in February after consumers retrenched amid high prices and elevated inflation. In China, profits at industrial companies rose 10.2% in the January-February period, and the four largest banks reported rising profits in 2023, but net interest margins narrowed, and bad loans to residential developers soared. In a rare policy move, China's President Xi Jinping urged the central bank to buy Chinese treasury bonds, a first in nearly 25 years, as the second largest economy struggles with policy options. Japan's unemployment rate edged higher, but the jobs to applications ratio moderated to 1.26%, indicating tight labor market conditions. Industrial productions declined by 3.4% in February amid continued weakness in vehicle and machinery production. Japan's retail sales rose 6.4% in February, an extended monthly increase for the 24th month in a row amid rising prices and healthy consumer demand. India's current account deficit shrank in the December quarter after service exports and foreign remittances rose. Let us review key events in global bond, currency, and commodity markets last week. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury decreased 2 basis points to 4.20% after the U.S. fourth quarter GDP growth was revised slightly higher to 3.4%, and investors digested mixed comments from policymakers. West Texas Intermediate crude oil increased to $83.50 a barrel and extended the first quarter gain to 19% as the OPEC continued its efforts to lift the prices to $90 a barrel by limiting global supplies amid elevated geopolitical tensions. The natural gas prices in Europe edged down to 28 euros per megawatt hour after Norwegian supplies rebounded and traders reviewed the forecast of milder weather conditions for the first week of April. The euro eased 2% to $1.08 on speculation that the European Central Bank may cut the interest rate sooner than expected amid a string of weak inflation, employment, and economic growth data in the currency union. The yen steadied near 151 yen against the dollar and recovered from a 34-year low earlier in the week as the Bank of Japan and Ministry of Finance signaled possible currency market intervention as early as next month. Gold price jumped to a record high of $2,232 an ounce on the hopes that the central banks are ready to lower rates this year. Moreover, demand for bullion firmed up on elevated tensions in the Middle East, ongoing war in Ukraine, and tensions between the U.S. and China. The S&P 500 index extended weekly gains and rose to about 10% in the first quarter, the best quarterly gain in 5 years, driven by resilient earning rate cut optimism and a boom in artificial intelligence-linked stocks. European markets extended weekly gains and benchmark indices in Germany and France soared to a new record highs and jumped to above 9% in the first quarter on rate cut optimism and better than expected earnings. The Nikkei 225 declined 1.1% in the week, but jumped 21% and led the world markets after the Bank of Japan ended its negative rate policy and expectations of higher earnings attracted foreign investors. The Shanghai Composite Index struggled to advance despite the fact that 4 of the largest banks in China reported earnings growth. The Hang Seng Index was the lone decliner among leading world indexes in the first quarter. Indian market indices struggled to advance after investors faced persistently high valuations and worries of resurgent inflation. Let us shift our attention to merger deals, market movers, and earnings update from leading companies last week. Boeing announced leadership shakeup and the chief executive and chairman of the board agreed to step down. Supermicro Computers soared 9% after the company announced its plan to raise $2 billion. McCormick jumped 7% after the spice company reported better than expected results in its latest quarter. Hershey Company and Mondelez edged lower after the price of cocoa surged to a record high about $10,000 per ton. Alibaba Group was forced to shelve the listing of its logistics unit in Hong Kong after weak investor demand. BYD, the largest electric vehicle maker and based in China, reported a record profit in 2023, but the December quarter earnings growth slowed to 18.7%, the slowest increase in the last 8 quarters. H&M soared 15% after the Swedish retailer reported better than expected quarterly results. DS Smith Group soared 8% after the paper and packaging company confirmed preliminary deal talks with International Paper that could lead to an offer of £5.7 billion or about $7.2 billion. GameStop Corporation dropped 15% after the specialty retailer said fiscal fourth quarter sales declined as demand shifted to online games and streaming services. Shockwave Medical soared on a report that the company was in talks to be acquired by Johnson & Johnson. Haier's Smart Home rose 8% after the consumer appliance maker based in China reported better than expected 2023 results. China Life Insurance, the largest insurance company in China, reported a smaller than expected 31% decline in earnings in 2023. The 4 largest banks in China, ICBC, Bank of China, China Construction Bank, and Agriculture Bank, reported higher 2023 earnings, a tighter net interest margins, an increase in bad loans, but an improving non-performing loan ratio. Next week, the U.S. investors are looking ahead to the release of the job openings report on Tuesday from the government, the ADP's private sector employment update on Wednesday, and the non-farm payrolls report on Friday. In Europe, investors are looking ahead to the release of consumer price and producer price inflation reports and retail sales in the Eurozone. Germany and France are expected to report a rebound in factory orders. In Asia, investors are awaiting the release of the manufacturing and service sector activity updates and retail sales updates in China. Moreover, the Reserve Bank of India is scheduled to announce its monetary policy decisions, and the bank is expected to keep its policy rate at 6.5%. You can review daily U.S. and global financial market news, stock movers, earnings releases, SEC filings, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can find the latest financial books on Redera.com, keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com, review ETF and mutual fund performance and in-depth profiles on tickerfunds.com, and review market updates and stock movers in India on niveshak.in. That's all for today, and we will see you next week.